Silakan.
Please slideshow.
Silakan.
Oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
And good evening, guys, everyone. I'm glad to see you all here. In this sections, I would like to present another submaterial about sampling from populations. There are non-probability samplings and probability sampling. The next slide, please. Yeah, next. Okay. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Aulia Rahmah from class D. And then the first thing about methods of sampling, there are non-probability samplings. Non-probability sampling is characterized as a examining method in which the analyst chooses tests based on the subjective judgment of the analyst instead of random selections. It could be a less rigid strategy. This inspecting strategy depends intensely on the mastery of the analyst. It is carried out by perceptions, and analysts utilize it broadly for subjective inquiry about. And then in the non-probability samplings, there are three kinds of samplings. The first one is confidence sampling, the second is quota sampling, and the last is purposeful sampling. Sorry. The next slide, please. Yeah. Move to confidence sampling. What is confidence sampling? Confidence sampling is a method of sampling in which subjects or participants are selected for a research study based on how easy or convenient is it to reach or access them based on their availability to participate. A drawback of confidence sampling is that those not ensure that sample will be representative of the target population because the sample was selected out of confidence. A first come, first serve kind of approach. In a confidence sample, more confident individuals have a better chance of being selected than those who are less confident because we cannot have confident and inconfident individuals to different. We cannot know whether the sample we selected in representative or of the target populations. Next slide, please. Okay. This is the way how to application of confidence samplings. Yep. I take one example from the brain or organization, and start with how they process the data to interest the customer, and customer like a grade for products to get how to say in English, mempertahankan their image. Okay, the next slide, please. So here we can see there's some advantages of using confidence samplings. The first one is collect the data, inexpensive to create sample, easy to do research, low cost, readily available sample, and fewer rules to follow. Next, please. The second one is quota sampling, a method of sampling in which subjects or participants are selected based on known or non-criteria of characteristic in the target population. Type of quota sampling used when little is known about the characteristic of a target population. Using this type of quota sampling, an equal number of subjects or participants are selected for a given characteristic or demographic. In the quota samplings, there are two kinds: controlled quota samplings and uncontrolled quota samplings. The next, please. Okay, this is example of quota sampling. You can see I took four example of quota samplings. They are gender, 250 males and 250 females, ages, and employment status or locations. Next slide, please. How to applicate of quota samplings? There are four. I took four ways. The first one is time concentrate. The second is selection of subgroups. The third is the research needs a tight budget. And the last is no required pinpoint accuracy due to the nature of the research project. Next, please. And this is some of the advantages of using quota sampling. The first one is it saves time. Second is research confidence. Of course, save money. And the last is accurate the presentation of the population of interest. Next, please. The last kind of non-probability sampling is for purposeful sampling or purposive sampling. It's used when the researcher needs specific characteristics to be represented in the sample. The study requires that the participant have certain characteristics or experiences, so the researcher purposefully seeks to find participants with those characteristics or experiences. Okay, next please. We move to probability samplings. What is probability samplings? It's defined as a sampling technique in which the researcher chooses samples from a large population using a method based on the theory of probability. For a participant to be considered as a probability sample, he or she must be selected using a random selection. And in probability samplings, there are four kinds of samplings. The first one is simple random sampling. The second is stratified random sampling. The third is systematic samplings, and the last is cluster samplings. We move to the next explanation. Okay, simple random sampling. Simple random sampling is a method of sampling subjects and participants such that all individuals in the population have an equal chance of being selected and are selected using samplings with replacement. And a strategy used with this simple random sampling in which individuals select to be replaced before the next selection to ensure that the probability of selecting each individual is always the same. Okay, next is this example of simple random sampling. Yeah, I took one example. Yeah. The American Community Survey, or ACS, used a simple random sampling official from the United States Census Bureau follow a random selection of individuals, inhabitants of the US for a year, asking detailed questions about their lives in order to draw a conclusion about the whole population in the United States. Next, please. Stratified random sampling. This method of sampling in which population is divided into subgroups or stratas. Participants are then selected from each group using simple random sampling and are combined into overall sampling. This sampling can involve selecting an equal number of participants in each subgroup, called simple stratified random sampling, or selecting in different proportion of participants in each subgroup, called proportionate stratified random sampling. Move to the next slide. We can see the example of stratified random samplings. Yeah, I took one sample from the stratified random sampling. Suppose that 50% of middle schools in the state are urban, 30% of suburban, and 20% of rural. And you can see in the case the research can split population into three strata: urban, suburban, and rural. And then randomly select participants such that 50% of the selected are urban, and 30% are suburban, and 20% are rural. The three strata can combine the proportion of those from each geographic region in the sample will be identical to the proportion of the axis in the population of middle schools in the state. Next. The third is systematic sampling. Systematic sampling is a method sampling in which the first participant is selected using simple random sampling, and then every percent is systematically selected until all participants have been selected. Next, example of systematic sampling. Yeah, we can see. I took one example that if we want to select a random group of 1,000 people from population of 50,000 using systematic sampling, all the potential participants must be placed in a list and starting point will be selected. Once in the list formed, every fifth person on the list starting the count on the selected starting point will be chosen as participant. Since 50,000, yeah. Next, please. Okay, the last one is cluster sampling. Cluster sampling is a method of sampling in which subgroups or clusters of individuals are identified in the population, and then a portion of clusters that are representative in the population is selected, such as all individuals, and the selected clusters are included in the sample. All clusters that are not selected are omitted for this sample. Next. Okay, this is the example of cluster sampling. There are three single stage, two stage, and multi-stage. Yeah, we can see from the single stage. And GL wants to create sample of girls across 5 neighboring towns to provide education. Using single stage sampling, the NGO randomly selects towns, clusters to form a sample and extend help to the girls to verify the right of education in those towns. In the two stage, a business owner wants to explore the performance of his or her planes that are spread across various parts of the US. The owner creates cluster of the planes. He or she then selects random samples for this cluster to conduct research. And the multi-stage, an example is an organization intends to survey to analyze the performance of smartphones across Germany. They can divide the entire country's population into cities cluster and select cities with the highest population and also filter us using mobile devices. Okay, I think that's all of my presentations. Next, I would like to open the Q&A questions, and if you all or some of you have questions for me, yeah, it's time yours. Okay, who wants to give the
Me,
question? Okay, sister Nirmawati.
me Nirmawati. Okay, thank you for the time. So, based on your previous explanations, there are 4 types of probability sampling. They are simple random sampling, stratified random sampling, systematic sampling, and cluster sampling. And as we know, when we conduct a research, we usually use one of them as a sampling technique. So, can you give us explanations about the way to use all of them in the classroom research? I repeat my questions. Can you give us explanation about the 4 types of probability sampling in the classroom research? Did you get my point?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Is there another question? Anyone? Okay, while waiting another questions, I'll try to answer from the sister Nirmawati. So the question is, explain about the ways to use all of the non-probability sampling in the classroom research, right?
Yes.
Okay. 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 I start from the simple random. The way to use them in classroom is a print a class roster and cut the names into slips of paper and place student names into a container. Draw out names of students who will participate or number students on the class roster. Use the random number function in Excel to generate the desired number of random numbers. Match to the students' numbers. These are students who will participate. And go on to stratified random sampling. Separate students based on the desired characteristics such as grade level or gender into different groups. Then select students from each group separately using simple random technique described above. And for the systematic random sampling, decide how many students are needed to participate in the study. Take the number of students on the class roster and divide it by the number needed for the study. This provides the sampling interval and the class roster in alphabetic order. This is considered to be a random order. Take the alphabetized class roster, close your eyes, and point to a place on the roster. Do not start at the group of the list. The name where the finger pointing is the first participant for the study. Now, count the sampling interval. And this is the second participant. Continue this way until all participants are selected. When the end of the roster is reached, continue counting of the top of the roster until you ended up where you started. The last is cluster random. Which of the above techniques can be used for groups and students like classrooms or class periods? Have you got my point, Sister Nirmawati? I'm sorry for paying.
Yeah, oh my God, that was a great explanation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have a question? Okay, if there are any questions, I will end up this presentation. Thank you for all the attention and thank you for the time. And sorry for all my shortcomings. And wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.